All right, so Jeremy is not, he's going to be late. So he's asked me to drive the meeting until he gets here. Um, so today we're going to talk about a couple of things. One is we're going to discuss some fixes that Shwetha and I have been working on. It's mostly been Shwetha's effort. Uh, some fixes to the agent lifecycle that have are ended up fixing some long-standing uh, bugs in the agent lifecycle that we didn't really know were there until recently, and it kind of explains some of the other things that have been going on. Um, we're going to do a quick update of the state of the RabbitMQ update. And I hope Shwetha shows up for that because she's going to be more qualified to talk about that than I am. And Jeremy's note here says something about more historian fixes, but I think that's in relation to the on-stop event stuff. Oh yeah, no, there was actually a fix for the on-stop stuff does affect the historian stuff. It does fix a few issues that we ran into for historian. Um, hey, David, we can hear you. You want to mute yourself if you're not talking? Thanks, man. Awesome. All right, so the first thing we'll talk about is the fixes to the agent lifecycle. So originally there was a bug relayed to us about on-stop events not being on-stop functions not being called before an agent quits. And when we investigated, we realized that and we knew that in the past that on-stop events were consistently called, and then we noticed that there was that functionality turned out to be turned out to be very fragile, and something else that we changed that is completely unrelated was preventing agents from shutting down properly. And so, uh, if you've been if you would shut down an agent via the platform, you would see a -15 in the exit code, meaning that we had to the platform had to forcefully kill the agent because it wasn't shutting down properly on its own. So, um, so after some research and some um, experimentation, we didn't figure out exactly what would and would not cause it to work, but what we did was implement a more reliable shutdown mechanism. So now agents explicitly set up a signal interrupt handler that uh, fires the appropriate event in the agent to cause it to break out of its main loop and go into its shutdown process. Because before, the method that we were using to detect that the agent had been told to shut down was unreliable. So now it's much more reliable, and the on-stop events are getting called every time. This had implications for historian events. In the case of so one thing that was happening was in some cases the thread in the publication thread in a historian agent, if you shut down the agent or you forcefully killed the background thread in a historian, you risk corrupting your backup cache. And we've discovered this in some of our agents that got way behind in their publication.
Can I mention that the only reason that we were able to find this was because we started up some of the forwarders that were forwarding to our VC instance, and it basically swamped our VC instance, and in that swamping we forcefully killed the agent, and that is when the corruption that Kyle was mentioning actually happened.
Right.
So if that doesn't fit in your scenario, it wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I guess what this also, well, so you're sending the signal interrupt through the via the platform, but you because of the overloading of the platform, you couldn't um, get the platform to send the signal. So, um, what we could do, so in for in the future, instead of kill minus nining it, you kill minus sig int, and the agent should get the interrupt signal and shut down properly. Even though the platform can't send the signal because it's overloaded, you can still send that signal manually, and the agent will shut down properly. So, um, but now, and now because the on-stop methods are getting called reliably, um, the agents are shutting down, the historian agents will shut down that background thread cleanly, which means that it will finish whatever it's in the middle of publishing to a database, it will finish publishing that, and then, or if it's writing to the backup cache, it will finish that process before it actually exits. And since those things all happen and usually happen in well under a second, it should be very quick. Um, unless you're like waiting on a timeout for an agent to, because there's like uh, your historian is not actually running. Um, so this is resulting in clean agent shutdown. Consequently, this led us to looking into how the platform actually shuts down when you either send it when you do either a VOLTTRON control shutdown platform, or you hit control, or you have the platform running in the foreground and you hit control C. This caused us to revisit that, and we found out that that mechanism that it was using was also very fragile and wasn't always shutting down cleanly. In fact, we made a simple modification to how the um, how the platform shut down, completely unrelated. We thought completely unrelated to its shutdown mechanism. All we did was add a finally clause to an exception handler, and then the platform would stop shutting down properly. So I have described the old shutdown method as magic, um, and we made it less magic. And so now it also we've implemented an interrupt handler, and we've made we're in the process of or Shweta, according to an email she sent me this morning, has finished streamlining and unifying all the mechanisms for the platform to shut down so that it's consistent, and so we don't have to worry about the different ways that it can potentially shut down. One of those methods was to send a stop signal to the router. We're getting rid of that one because how the router was communicating that it had shut down to the platform was unreliable. So we're making that consistent so that when the platform is shut down, it will always shut down cleanly, and it will clean up its processes, and it'll give like RPC calls a chance to finish and stuff like that. So yeah, so that's also work that Shweta has done with me helping her out. But she gets credit for all the actual coding effort in that one for sure. And then Shweta, would you like to can you give us a quick update on the progress of the RabbitMQ message bus stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Cal. I've been so 2 weeks ago we had a discussion on the RabbitMQ design. Based on that, I implemented it, and I'm in the process of testing the message bus. I'm halfway through. I need to test many more things, and hopefully should be in a functional state by Monday or Tuesday. So when I mean by functional state, I mean that if we start the VOLTTRON instance and an agents with a flag for to use the 0MQ based message bus, it should automatically do the things that it was doing as before. And if you want to change to new RabbitMQ message bus, we just have to flip the flag to use as RabbitMQ, and then it should start connecting. It should connect to the RabbitMQ broker and use that as the underlying message bus. What else? So this implementation, currently we are not using auth. I just wanted to get the basic functionality up and going. And also we haven't yet, we did an initial design of how it would support backward compatibility with another instance, which is when it connects to a remote instance that is 0MQ based. But I haven't implemented a proxy agent to do that. It would be my next step. We are targeting for a release by end of March. So hopefully by next week we should be in a position to have the RabbitMQ message bus running. As Craig and Kyle were discussing about the case where the 0MQ message bus was overloaded, sending messages continuously to fill up the databases. What Craig observed was that the CPU percentage for 0MQ based VOLTTRON process was very, very high. So that led me to so the discussion, the follow-up discussion was how would it change if we use RabbitMQ based message bus. So I had for testing purpose, we had very rudimentary implementation of RabbitMQ inside VOLTTRON that just had pub/sub communication. So when I tested it, when I did a comparison between the two, it was nearly, the VOLTTRON process with RabbitMQ based message bus took nearly half the amount of CPU, was using up half the CPU percentage. So we are, I believe that we are moving in the right direction. Yeah, that is what I've been doing so far.
Excellent, thank you. Well, geez, we got through all of our topics pretty quickly. Yeah, so Shweta, for the agent lifecycle stuff, Shweta and I have a meeting this afternoon where we're going to go over the changes. I believe you said there was already a pull request in?
There's a pull request in for the agent on stop, but for the platform on stop, all after yesterday's discussion, all that I added was added a except block in the router code to for keyboard interrupt, and that magically solved all our problems.
Yay!
But we still need to discuss some if there are any edge cases. I believe there might be a couple of them.
Okay.
So just so that we have a complete, we put an end to this discussion once and for all.
I totally agree. That is definitely what we want to do. So these changes will be going into the release candidate, and they will be in develop. You can. Craig is saying that they might be backported to 4.1. We'll have to see about that. But yeah, so you should see those changes shortly. It's not like the platform is unusable right now. That's just that there will be the shutdown process will be more consistent, and you'll stop seeing errors in your VOLTTRON when you run VOLTTRON status.
What changes will that require on user developed agents?
Nothing.
Okay.
This is all in Agent Core and in the platform executable, so you don't have to do anything different. It basically things that weren't working before will start working.
You'll have to
Okay.
restart the platform.
Yeah, you have to restart your platform and your agents, and that's it. You don't have to rebuild anything.
Is there some API that you can hook when that interrupt comes through? Like, is that? I guess I haven't done that in any of my agents, but I haven't needed it.
Yeah, so
Does that exist?
yeah, traditionally, what you've always done is so like you could have an on start function that gets called on agent startup. There's an on stop that gets all of the on stop methods get called during agent shutdown. So that was what drove this fix. Is almost nobody uses on stop, except that we have a user now that had to free a global resource on agent shutdown, and the on stops were not being called, and that's what led us to figure all this out. One of the things that led us to figure all this out. So yeah, but like I say, that's part of the reason why this problem has been around for so long, is because usually you don't need to stop. Usually you don't have shutdown methods in your agent. So yeah, and as far as like a hook into, yeah, so that's the closest thing that we have as into a hook into the interrupt call, and it effectively serves the same purpose. So
And then, so this sort of MVP RabbitMQ implementation,
yes.
where is that going? So um, you said there was, to develop a proxy agent. Is that the solution that's going to be moving forward? That if you have some sort of, some nodes running RabbitMQ and some nodes running ZeroMQ, you'll have to operate some proxy between them?
Yeah, it's and
That's what we think
yeah,
at this point, anyways.
yeah, and Shweta can jump in and correct me if I go astray here, but the idea is that we would have an agent or maybe like a router process that basically presents the externally facing interface to remote agents that currently exists for ZeroMQ, and then it just acts as a go-between between the ZeroMQ message bus and the RabbitMQ, translating the VIP from one to the other. And yeah, so that's basically how we would do it. So if you have the need to connect old and new agents together, you would just on the new instances of the platform, you would just set up the proxy. And if for some reason you're running the 5.5 or whatever version it ends up being that supports RabbitMQ, and for some reason you need to run ZeroMQ versions of that, you would just set up the proxies and go. Although I think we will probably have support for interoperating with 5.0 versions of the platform, even though you can't actually use RabbitMQ on 5.0. But you would just set up the proxy for ZeroMQ platform and then connect to it with your 5.0 version of 5.0 node. Now these are good questions, Andrew.
And then where does my, like, in the context of how we use VC with VIP and ZeroMQ currently, do I need to run VOLTTRON, or can I just run a RabbitMQ cluster somewhere that all of these things connect to?
So the core platform executable, in addition to providing the router, also provides agent services like the config store and stuff like that. So you'd still have to run the platform process.
I'm talking about like the way we use VOLTTRON Central now. So like we like our implementation of VOLTTRON Central right now is essentially just using it as a message broker between all these nodes and a historian agent. So
right.
Assuming we're still running an historian agent somewhere on some VOLTTRON platform, that's fine. But does that VOLTTRON platform need to operate the main RabbitMQ broker, or can we run that as an actual native RabbitMQ broker somewhere and have that connect to it?
I guess I'm having trouble following your question. Have you seen the slides that we presented a while ago?
Two weeks
Okay.
ago.
Yeah, so I guess I'm trying to.
So he's asking whether or not the VOLTTRON process will start up and run its own RabbitMQ instance, or if it can connect to a third-party RabbitMQ instance.
Oh, okay. So the assumption is that the RabbitMQ service is going to be available for the platform to connect to. So it's basically, you run RabbitMQ as a service on that box, and then when you fire up VOLTTRON, the VOLTTRON platform, it says, okay, here's my RabbitMQ instance, and here's the virtual host that I'm in charge of managing. All right, let's go.
So I guess the real question is, does that RabbitMQ instance have to be on that box, or can it be?
It does not, and actually that's kind of an interesting point. But you would only it because it's now it's now the core routing functions of the platform are moved off on RabbitMQ. Yeah, technically you would not have to run the VOLTTRON platform instance on the same machine, as long as it has the credentials and the connection information. I suppose you could do that. The other thing is if you have multiple instances of the VOLTTRON platform running on the same machine. I mean, we were discussing this in the context of running a bunch of VOLTTRONs on the same machine. Each one of those is going to need their own virtual host and RabbitMQ. So I suppose you could have one central instance of RabbitMQ serving as the message broker for a bunch of remote instances of VOLTTRON, if you wanted to do it like that. There might be some performance implications to that, or there probably would be.
Yeah, it's not for the edge. I'm just thinking of like retooling our data flow in the cloud, that we would have some high availability RabbitMQ cluster running, and then the historian agent just connecting to that.
Yep.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can.
What's nice about from a deployment perspective, what's nice about that is when I want to version jump that historian node, I can just build it like that. That node can only be the historian. I don't have to worry about any other functionality. And it would just.
Yeah, I think that you can already. Well, in this case, you're like sending. I guess it depends on what your historian is doing, because if it's connecting directly to a database, and it's not like forwarding to another instance of the platform. Let me. I'm thinking here. I guess what I'm saying is that you can already set up a historian that is connected to a remote platform, and I'm not talking about like a Forge historian. I'm talking like a SQL historian or something. That's it's the instance of the platform that it's connected to is somewhere else. I guess but your historian's going to be gathering data that's being published to the local message bus by a master driver, right? I assume that's kind of the flow.
Or I mean, the way we do it is with the forward historian, right? So
right. Yeah. So I guess the thing is if you have here's what you would probably do is you would have a master driver. Well, what you would do is you would have an instance of the platform running out on your node. You would have the master driver set up, and then you would have the Federation plugin basically forwarding stuff to a central instance of the platform, and so the Federation essentially becomes your forwarder. Now, if you wanted to do something like have just a master driver agent connected to a remote instance of the platform's message bus without
Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just asking for losing data.
Yeah.
Well, you can. Well, if all that master driver is doing is publishing, and you've got, and RabbitMQ is set up properly so that your queues are
If you
back to.
don't have it local, though, if you lose
Yeah,
connection with that remote system, that's when you lose data.
that's true.
That's
Yeah.
why the federation on the edge would make more sense. Or
Okay.
at least from a data capturing perspective. In all the diagrams that I have seen, anyways, that's the way that you can lose it, that you can set it up such that you pretty much have a guarantee of not losing data.
Okay. So you could do something like, well, you could also do on the edge. You could have an instance of RabbitMQ that connects to. You could do like a clustering situation of RabbitMQs so that the thing that's so that you could have agents running out on the edge, and then the RabbitMQs would catch the data in the queues, preserve it, and then make sure that it gets reliably published to the instance of to the RabbitMQ node that actually has the historian on it. In theory, I know that.
Well,
I mean, that's what
theory,
I just said.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that I'm not
theory,
talking about using federations.
Okay.
But in theory, isn't RabbitMQ going to do that anyway?
Only if you set it up to.
Yeah, you have to set it up. You have to configure it to do
Yeah,
it. But
yeah.
yeah.
And there are.
But it has that capability, yes.
I mean, when you have if we're connecting two platforms that are both running RabbitMQ,
Right.
and you have something on one platform publishing to another platform, are those queues not going to be protected with all of the nice batteries built in RabbitMQ features?
They will with VOLTTRON, yes.
Well, it's going to be a per it's got to be a per agent or per topic setup, because like if the master driver publishes, it's going to say, yeah, we're going to put a time to live on these, and then the different queues are going to determine whether or not the data is preserved in the queue instead of, because you're going to have things that are going to subscribe to devices topics, and it's like, well, we don't care about stale data, and if the agent's not running, we don't want the queue to stay around, so we just want to drop it. But like for a historian, you would say, okay, we want this queue to persist even if the agent dies, and the master driver is going to put a time to live on the stuff that it's publishing, so the things that end up in the queue for that historian are going to persist, and then assuming that you get the historian restarted before the time to live and runs out on the master driver publishes, then you won't lose any data. So it's situational, and so we've already discussed adding to the subscribe interface to allow agents to define what are they basically the pub sub queues to persist. So if the agent isn't running, it doesn't lose anything.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's like I say, it's really a per agent thing, for the reasons that I just mentioned. So yeah, but like I say, we're going to have the ability. We're going to add the ability for when you publish something, you basically specify the time to live, and of course the obvious use case for that is to have the master driver take advantage of it, so that if your historians are not running, you're not losing data. Okay. Do you have any other questions, Andrew? This is good.
No, I do have a feature development or agent development topic that I was going to bring up and see what people think.
Okay.
So whenever y'all get to that point.
I think we've discussed everything on the agenda. Are there any other questions about stuff that we've discussed?
Hey, this is Bob. I've got a couple RabbitMQ questions.
Sure. I will do my best.
Okay, so I was just reviewing the slides that you guys sent out after our call, and I'm trying to remember. So you've got a bunch of different configurations in here. Which was the ultimate one that you landed on? I couldn't remember going back and looking. Like there's
Okay. I think we've since updated the slides and added like in parentheses, like rejected or something like that
okay.
to make it clear as to which one's which. But if you are asking about a particular configuration, I can probably just tell you off the top of my head.
Well, I know you guys were talking about using a topic exchange, I
Yes.
think, for everything.
Yes.
You've got these different versions where you've got various queues, each with their own binding, versus one queue with an agent binding and another pub sub queue with multiple bindings, and then one queue with all the bindings.
Yeah. I believe what we settled on was one queue per binding, so that we can distinguish between queues that persist. We can it'll allow the agent to specify that the queue for this subscription needs to persist even if I die, and so that allows you to have that separation.
Okay.
And then it also allows, in theory, we'll see if there are any technical issues that we run into when we do this, but in theory, we should be able to use the Pika library directly for handling the calling of the callbacks for us.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So then my other question, I couldn't remember why you opted not to use the direct exchange for RPC and then topic for everything else.
And the topic for everything else. Okay, so it was in some use cases, if you need to use in the multi-platform case, if you needed to use shovels to send data between the instances of the platform, you couldn't do it. You couldn't do it efficiently with a separate direct exchange.
And
And
you tried it? Because I didn't get that in the docs at all.
Okay. There was and I don't think it was a matter of efficiency. It was like we couldn't do it like correctly at all.
Okay.
And there was, geez, if I haven't written it down in the slides already, I really should, because I looked, and maybe I already sent this, maybe the slides I sent to Jeremy, because we've got an updated slide deck. I think I made a slide discussing this, because this is the second time this question is answered, and this is the second time where I went, I don't remember. I know it's a good reason, but I don't remember the exact answer.
It does say use topic exchange to facilitate multi-platform with a shovel and reduce complexity.
Yeah.
But again, from the docs, it didn't seem.
Which document? Which docs? The docs that we wrote, or the docs from RabbitMQ?
RabbitMQ.
Yeah.
But you do say shovel setup requires foreknowledge of agent subscriptions.
Yes, and that was a big part of it. Oh yeah, that actually gets I think that gets right to the heart of the issue. Is if you use a topic exchange, you can set up the shovel to handle the RPC calls with one binding. But if you use a direct exchange, you have to have one binding per agent running on the remote to do RPC calls to. And so you can't just do a blanket, I am subscribed to everything that starts with the prefix of my platform name, which will make sure that everything that needs to cross that boundary actually crosses the boundary. Whereas if you use a direct exchange, in order to make sure that everything that crosses the boundary needs to, you have to be aware of and change the bindings of the shovel, because unlike the Federation, the shovel doesn't update itself automatically. And so that's the core reasoning right there. And then
also, sorry.
Yeah.
And also with a single topic exchange, you can have both the features, right? Have the RPC and the pub sub feature. So
Yeah.
It made sense to have a single exchange, a single
Right.
topic exchange that
Yeah.
can provide us all the features that we are looking for instead of having two
Yeah.
different exchanges.
Yeah, and this actually makes me think of another thing. If you have two separate exchanges, then if you want to set up the connections to the remote platform, you have to open up two connections instead of one, at least. And we don't.
I thought the connection was between brokers.
Well,
Yeah, you don't need to open two connections.
it's not. So there's not like one because you would have to have two shovels, one for the pub sub and one for the or two federations, one for the pub sub and one for the direct.
No, it's you connect to the broker, so you have
So it's
just
only
one connection.
so it's only
But
actually one connection.
yeah,
Okay.
but those two basic reasons hold good.
Okay.
For RPC, the shovel keys can have the prefix after the platform and agent as hash that allows you to bind to any of the agents that you want.
Yeah.
So in direct exchange, you would have to have several such bindings.
Right, but so then you've just got a little bit of routing going on in the agent as opposed to using RabbitMQ to do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Well, we're taking the responsibility of a lot of the responsibility of the routing and putting it into RabbitMQ's hands with this setup. Because, like I say, if we could do it with a shovel, but then we would be like updating that shovel with new bindings as agents connected and disconnected from the platform, and with a topic exchange, we don't even have to mess with it.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. All right. Are there any other questions about the message bus? Okay. Andrew, you said you had some questions about agent development stuff?
Well, I just is this useful? And I'm still not sure how to implement it. It may require its own agent that would say be an alternate to both the forward historian or the data mover agents.
Okay.
Because rather than just publishing directly to the bus on the other end, I think it would have to be running on both ends.
Okay.
But I think Terry had reached out to somebody, one of y'all's group, about and was asking about compression, and it got me thinking about some compression options that we could take. And some of those, like for us and our use case, generally once we set up the ingestion of data from a building, those configurations stay pretty static for long periods of time. But as I understand what I've looked at so far, we are sending this data in essentially like a JSON format, and we're sending topic data with each point, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea is, could we have these two agents, a sender and receiver? It could be one agent that does both purposes, but that when you set up a flow between them, they would negotiate sort of a schema for the state of the data as it is, and then if they saw a new topic, they would agree on a new schema. But in that case, you could do away with all this metadata you're sending every time. And we would just be pushing values back and forth. And we could then also use something like, Message Pack or Thrift or any of these other millions of different, serialization solutions.
Yeah. The thing that's so you brought up a couple of points that are interesting and warrant discussion. Okay, so for instance, Message Pack, the thing that makes me anxious about switching to Message Pack is the same is the problems that we ran into when we tried to switch to UJSON for the message
Yeah.
bus.
No,
And
and I don't want to. I see this as like it's not something I think is maybe worth implementing at the core level. It would be like you make a choice that you want to deploy this for certain types of data that are are not changing, are not very dynamic.
So Andrew, is this with your agent that you already built the what was it, the one that you get metrics off of?
Yeah.
That you basically turn everything into a what is it,
I just adopted
it's
the
the Prometheus
ingestion format. Yeah.
Right. So you turned the response code into a tar GZ or something like that, if I remember correctly. But you still pass something over the message bus that is
serializable.
Serializable, right?
Yep.
So as long as you do that, I don't see that you on either side. As long as you have as long as it's the agent is doing it, I don't see there being an issue.
Yeah, I don't think there's an issue. I'm just kind of seeing what the interest level is, or if other people find that to be a valuable. My goal would be that right now, since we started this project, storage is cheap on the back end. Like there's not a problem. Our issue is this data connection to these buildings.
Yeah, with the cellular network and whatnot, right?
And it's not, and what we're doing is fine, but like with that, I could probably easily get it so compressing the data like with GZ with the data I was sending, which is very similar serialized data that like JSON is, that was giving me like a 6x compression.
Yeah, most definitely.
And if I actually did away with all the metadata and only sent that when there were changes to the structure, and just define, like dynamically defined a schema for each of these, for this path, then that would I could easily go from 15-minute interval to 1-minute interval or less with the same amount of bandwidth.
In order the way that you would do this is you just have a translation from the structure that comes out of the master driver, and you do away with the metadata and publish your own stuff across the message bus in your compressed format.
Yeah, I see this as just being duplicating either the forward historian or the data mover and adding this as a layer.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah,
and adding the receiver side so that it would look, it would be watching for topics. However, if I flagged this with a specific topic.
I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, one of the things that I was thinking about. So you mentioned that you were using gzip and you were getting a 6x performance bump or a size reduction. I haven't talked to anybody about this, but we recently in the Python users group talked about the compression libraries that are in the standard library in Python, and it dawned on me, based on this topic popping up in on Slack, that was the first thing I thought. It was like maybe we could just start make it an option that you can optionally compress messages on the bus, so that you could do put a flag in the header that says everything else is compressed, and then it will, on the other end, it will ungzip it before it in the core before it does anything. So
I don't know that we want to do that, because I think that right now, even when we forward stuff up to VOLTTRON Central, we're swamping that, and this is just adding more processing to the router.
Well, that's why you would make it optional.
Well, of course, but still.
Yeah.
I like the idea of the separation of the agent, so that, and then at least starting there.
Yeah.
The nice thing though about gzip is that as long as you're running on Intel platforms, it's heavily accelerated. So when I did that, I saw almost zero
overhead.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
It's really efficient.
So that's
and we talked about that. Kyle and I have talked about that off and on for the past year.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that steers me away from message pack and is just and this is I'm not saying that, I just, this is unrelated. I considered message pack as a way to increase the performance of the message bus and reduce the amount of data getting pushed across. One of the things that I steered me away from that is there's a feature in Simple JSON that we're probably going to start leveraging in future versions of the platform that was not available in UJSON, and as far as I know is not available in the message pack Python library, and that is being able to, well, actually message pack does kind of support this now that I think about it. Well, finish my sentence. No. Okay, is being able to specify custom data types. And so the biggest use case is in simple JSON, we could set it up so it could look for a specific thing when it's marshalling and unmarshalling so that it will handle like date times natively, that being the big one. So then we could not necessarily do away with the parse and unparse parse and parse timestamp method. There would still be use cases for it, but we would be able to you could just send a date time over the message bus without having to worry about it, and it would come out as a date time on the other end. I think we could actually do that with message pack.
Yeah, you can. You absolutely can. You just define what your decode.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
right, because there's a bunch of reserved codes specifically for that. Yeah, that's right. So you'd have to.
But I mean, the problem with message pack and using it natively is that having I don't know that it gets you a whole lot because your data natively is not structured. It's whatever the agent decides to shove in the JSON blob. Right. And where if I have structured data that I know what the structure is, now I can get like massive efficiency gains. But yeah, I mean. For me, like one problem for me though is that like something that and I'm not claiming to have thought this all through 100%, and maybe like just adding some gzip compression is the most efficient, fastest way to do it. But if I did define a schema, then I would have to, if a device quit respond, like I don't change what I ask for, but I don't necessarily always get what I ask for because, a device on the network stops responding or something like that. Yeah. So it's static in that I always ask for the same thing, but it's not static in that sometimes I don't get everything I ask for.
Okay. So I guess when you're talking about schemas, that's not a message pack feature, right?
No. But like. Okay. No, I'm not. I'm talking about like I'm thinking, and I was coming at this from like a protobuf, actually. Which is a little more structured, but it would also save even more.
Right, but overhead. But the message bus should be able to cope with anything. So.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's why I was saying putting it in a completely, and they would have to accept like. It would be dynamic in that it could cope with anything, but it would just dynamically generate the schema it's going to use for that, for that building or node or whatever.
Yeah, well, you can send binary data over the message bus, but I think it changes it into a base 64 string, and so that kind of undoes a lot of the benefits that you get. So
not necessarily. I mean, it's not too bad. It's not the worst.
Okay. I'm thinking out loud here.
Yeah. But anyway, so there's some interest, and I may play with it and build an agent that y'all can look at and see what you think. And I'll probably just fork one of the existing, either data mover or forward historian.
So in order to send binary data across the message bus, you actually have to go into a separate subsystem, separate channel subsystem.
Oh.
Because that's how.
Unless you base 64 encode it yourself.
Unless you base 64 encode it yourself, which is what VC accepts from the. So if when you install an agent package, through the web interface, it will base 64 encode and send it across.
Okay.
because that's the easiest way to deal with it, and so you don't have all that crap to worry
Yeah.
about.
Don't do the channel stuff. It's hard to get right.
It's ugly.
Yeah. I mean, it works, but we gotta know what you're doing. Okay. No, this is a really good discussion. Thank you for bringing this up, Andrew. Um, Although the thing that makes message pack promising, going back to that, is at least the things that stopped us from switching to UJSON. Those problems, as far as I can tell, like handling uh, not a number and infinity floats and stuff like that. I think UJSON can handle that properly, or not UJSON. I think MessagePack can handle that properly, and that was if I recall, and Shweta can correct me if I'm wrong. That was the big stumbling block for switching
Well,
to.
the big stumbling block was because UJSON didn't do binary. Everything had to be UTF,
Oh, that's right.
and ZMQ likes binary.
Uh, okay. That's right, and we were fighting with it, trying to fix it everywhere, and we eventually threw up our hands and gave up. And then there was the issue with it not handling nans and infinities and stuff like that, which I think Andrew ran into that. So, okay, all right. Well, is there anything else that people want to talk about?
Hi, my name is Alan. I'm in Colorado. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Hi, I spoke with Jeremy a few weeks ago by phone, a
Hmm.
conference call. And is that you? I got on the phone a little late, about half an hour into your discussion. Is that you, Jeremy? That we can say now?
No, my name is Kyle. Jeremy is on the
Kyle.
call. He came in a little late.
Okay.
Yep, I'm on now.
Okay. So this is very basic. I'm not a developer, so I'm an electric utility engineer, or was. I'm retired now, but I'm trying to develop another project. Has VOLTTRON been developed so that, or is there a development now, an agent so that it could go outside the building and be used by an electric utility to communicate to end user devices, switches, for example, smart relays, smart switches. Is that an option at this time?
Well, it depends on the main question is protocol, what network protocol are those end switches using to communicate? If they're even using like a network protocol. If there's some sort of,
Yes, like IP or
yeah,
PNNL 3.0.
yeah. So out of the box, VOLTTRON currently supports any BACnet device within, I should say within reason. There are some limitations. Any Modbus device, and then there's and when I say any Modbus or any BACnet device, they both
Any
have
standard one.
yeah, a standard one, and also they need to do their BACnet communication has to be done over over UDP via Ethernet. Modbus also has to be done over it's TCP/IP, but there's a new driver that was recently pulled in to develop that supports serial connections, serially connected Modbus devices, and then there are a few other drivers. So
There's actually an SEP 2.0 driver in there, and then Casensum is on the call. Rob and Bob, is DNP3 still on the horizon?
We are actively working on it, so we'll have a DMP3 agent and driver within 2 months.
Perfect. So there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's where we're at, and then we've tried to make if you're not a programmer, of course, then it becomes quite a bit more difficult. But we've tried to make it as easy as possible to add additional drivers in so that they create a universal interface for like our historians and agents to talk to.
Mhm.
So that the underlying protocol is, in theory, should be immaterial.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's where we're at right now. And so the thing to do would be to look at like how are you actually going to establish communication with the devices that you want to try and drive or collect data from.
Yes, that's telecom in the mountains where I am. Is going to be interesting. It probably have to be over internet. Some of the smart relays and the smart switches are Wi-Fi devices.
Okay.
Which would connect by the premises, the home or the business Wi-Fi to the internet, and then and the hub would be something out there in the cloud. And then the utility would have to connect to the cloud to do the two-way. So there are other providers out there such as Skycentrix, and Skycentrix I think uses VOLTTRON. It's in some application. I spoke with Tristan a few weeks ago.
Oh, great!
But it's the difference between purchasing and licensing a big platform that is sufficiently adequate for consolidated edison, he mentioned. It's one of their clients, versus a small project to turn on. The idea is to turn on electric heaters would be the simplest. When the solar PV community garden, the 1 megawatt project, when it's online and producing, then okay, let's soak up that excess energy now in real time, as opposed to just dumping it on the grid or trying to store it in batteries.
Yeah.
So that's the thought. Okay, good. Well, I'll keep listening to your sessions.
Yeah.
When I get the notices. Thank you.
Yeah. The only probably the biggest caveat to at least the one that I run into to our device communication framework is we are working under the assumption that you're dealing with a series of, I guess you call them data points, and that you can either write to them or receive them. And sometimes that model, usually it fits, you can make it fit, but we have device drivers where that model doesn't fit very well. Because and so just you just ask us questions about, this is the thing that I want to try and do with this device, and run it by us, and we'll tell you, okay, how easy or difficult that's going to be. I think like a good example was the charge point. Was it the charge point driver? Or we had a driver that would talk serially to a vehicle charging station.
That was a EV. It was
EVSE.
EVSE.
Yeah,
okay.
that's
Okay.
right.
Open EVSE.
Open
Yeah,
EVSE.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
With
Yeah.
UW guy.
ChargePoint is in there too, but that talks to the
Okay. Yeah. See, I'm getting my projects crossed here, but my point was that it was the way that the driver needed to talk to the device serially was like it didn't mesh. In some instances, it didn't mesh very well, and so a lot of extra effort was required to make it kind of fit in the paradigm that we established for device communication. But it's just about anything can be made to work. But if there's certain things like I want to, if you want a driver that alerts the platform the moment a signal is sent from the device, that's not what our drivers are designed to do. They will get the current state of the device and publish it periodically depending on how you've elected to set it up. So it's not, it's completely, it's passive, I guess is the the right word to describe it. You can't currently it doesn't fit very well with devices that want to publish a new state instead of devices. Ours works better with devices where you can just go and ask it for its state. And
Or
now,
you could,
Okay.
yeah,
you conceivably make a change of state type of driver or something though.
yeah, and it has been done. So, but if you run into those kind of situations, of course you're probably at that point you're not dealing with the protocols that we support, because with like one exception, none of them really do that. So, yeah. So it's just you know, I. I'm trying to manage expectations here.
Sure, that's all right. Yeah, I understand. I'm familiar with if it were an electric utility substation.
Yeah.
Inside the fence, and you have IEDs and meters, and
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
may use MyBus, and may use DNP 3.0 or even something older,
Yeah.
But the substation controller and communications hub might have a protocol converter, but
Yeah.
it's polling. I think is the way we would do that, and set it up to ask every
Oh yeah.
3 or 10 or some seconds to get a data point value
Oh.
and a status on a switch. Whether you're open or closed is important.
Yeah.
And then store it in the historian.
Yeah.
So
I
I know the concept.
that fits nicely with what we're doing.
Yeah, that does. Okay, good.
Yeah. Yeah.
'Cause that's my concept too. Was just take the substation concept and move it outside now. And when we're going to homes and businesses, if we can telecommunicate, and if we have compatible or convertible protocols. So that's at present. My task is trying to get answers from like Eaton, which makes the Cooper LCR 6600 smart relay and smart breaker now. When they get done making it, it's just, what does your data look like? What protocol is it? Is it CTA 2045 or what? So I'll keep working on that end. So thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Good to listen to you. Thanks, Jeremy, for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for calling in.
Okay.
All right. Well, it's noon. So if there's, I will be happy to stay on the call if anybody has any more questions. But if not, we'll go ahead and wrap it up.
Good job,
All right.
Kyle.
Yeah, thanks,
Good
Kyle.
evening.
You're welcome.
Lunchtime.
Oh, for sure.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, real quick,
Sure.
is Craig still there? Craig already dropped off.
Craig, jump back in the meeting. Yeah, somebody's got a question for you.
Not hugely important. I was just going to try to bump a conversation and make sure that he actually got a email. I sent it back to the VOLTTRON, forwarded it back to the VOLTTRON list as well. Yeah, but about some updates I was making to the emailer agent. Yeah, I had some questions about a few things that I saw there.
So this, let's go ahead and I think we can stop the recording though. Kyle.
Okay. All right.